The blizzard clawed across the empty streets, winds howling like wolves through a town that had long since stopped listening. A frail 6-year-old girl with tangled brown hair, dressed in a torn pink shirt, far too thin for the season, stumbled through the snow. Her lips were blue, her arms shaking, yet she held a small keepsake pressed tight to her chest, a worn photograph creased at the edges. Her eyes brimmed with tears, though she fought to keep them from falling. The photograph was all she had left of her mother. Beside the flickering light of a broken street lamp, a figure emerged from the storm. A weary soldier in camouflage, his gait steady but heavy, as though each step carried the weight of ghosts. At his side trotted a German Shepherd K9, ears sharp, body taut, moving in rhythm with his handler. They stopped when they saw the girl. "Before we begin, let me know where you are watching from. Leave your country name in the comments below. And if you love stories about courage, loyalty, and community, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories." The girl stumbled and fell to her knees, the photograph slipping from her frozen fingers. She gasped, scrambling to clutch it back, terrified that the storm might carry it away. The soldier crouched in front of her, his rough gloves brushing away the snow before she could grab it. He handed the photograph back gently, not saying a word. The K9 lowered itself beside the girl, tail sweeping the snow, nose brushing her arm as if to ask permission. She flinched at first, then slowly extended a trembling hand to the dog's fur. Her breath hitched, but the warmth of the animal's body began to calm the storm inside her chest. "Easy," the soldier murmured. His voice was rough, weathered by years of shouting commands and swallowing grief. "You're safe now." The words nearly broke her. She hadn't heard them in so long. The girl hugged her photograph to her chest again. Through chattering teeth, she whispered, "They told me I don't belong. They locked me out, said I wasn't worth dinner." The soldier's jaw tightened, a flicker of rage in his eyes quickly swallowed by discipline. He glanced at the K9, who seemed to share his unspoken resolve. The dog pressed closer to the girl, leaning its weight against her, anchoring her trembling body. The soldier took off his heavy scarf and wrapped it gently around her neck. She winced at the sudden warmth, but didn't resist. "Where's your home?" he asked. The girl shook her head. Snowflakes clung to her hair. "Not home? Not anymore." She tried to speak more, but her lips quivered, and instead she buried her face in the K9's fur. The dog didn't move, letting her sob into its coat. The soldier recognized that trust. He had seen it on battlefields in moments when only the bond with the K9 kept him standing. Now it was keeping this child from breaking apart. He looked around the empty street. The shuttered houses with curtains drawn, lights flickering inside, but no one opening their doors. People knew, people always knew, and they always turned away. The soldier stood slowly, snow crunching under his boots. His past whispered in the storm, gunfire, the cries of his brothers in arms, the helplessness of arriving seconds too late. He clenched his fists until the tremor of memory subsided. Not again, not this time. He offered his hand to the girl. "Come with us." "You don't have to be alone tonight." She stared at the hand, then at the dog. It was the dog she trusted first. The German Shepherd nudged her side, a small huff of warm breath in the freezing air. Only then did she reach up and take the soldier's hand. Together they moved through the storm. They reached an abandoned community hall, its roof sagging but walls intact. The soldier pushed the door open, sweeping snow aside with his shoulder. Inside, the air was stale but still. He set down his pack, coaxed the girl toward an old bench, and started a fire in the rusted stove. The girl sat silently, clutching the photograph, scarf wrapped around her shoulders. The K9 lay at her feet, its body curved protectively around her. She leaned into the warmth, eyes half closed, but fear still gnawed at her. The soldier knelt to her level, his scarred face softened by the firelight. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Lila." Lila, he repeated, letting the name settle in the room. I'm Daniel. And this here is Rook. He nodded at the K9, who thumped his tail in acknowledgement. Her lips twitched into the faintest smile, gone almost as quickly as it came. Daniel sat back, his knees creaking. He pulled out a small metal flask, poured warm water into a cup, and slid it toward her. She drank greedily, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. When the fire grew stronger, he asked, Lila, do you have anyone looking for you? She shook her head. Her fingers traced the photograph's edges. My stepfather, she whispered finally. He says I cost too much, that I'm not his. He locked me out. Daniel's chest tightened. Rook lifted his head, ears forward, sensing the weight of her words. The soldier fought down the images clawing at his mind, memories of locked gates overseas, of children caught in wars they didn't start. His hands trembled, the ghosts rising again. The crack of the stove sounded too much like gunfire. He flinched. Rook nudged his knee, grounding him back in the present. Daniel exhaled slowly. You're not a burden, Lila. Not to me, not to Rook. You matter. Her small shoulders shook. She whispered into the dog's fur, barely audible. Can you come to Parent Day? Daniel froze. Parent Day. The simple school event he'd never thought of, never been invited to, the kind of day that meant nothing to soldiers but everything to children. The weight of her request crushed him more than any battlefield ever had. Rook's eyes met his, as if urging him to answer. Daniel swallowed hard, his voice low, breaking. Yes, Leela. I'll be there. Her tears finally fell, silent trails down her cheeks. She clutched the photograph tighter, as though it might disappear, and whispered one more time, Please don't send me back. The fire crackled. Outside, the storm screamed. Inside, a promise had been made. By morning, the blizzard had thinned to a hard glitter, the streets knifed with wind, and the kind of cold that turned breath into glass. Daniel waited until the stove's coals were ash and the hall's windows were a pale square of day. Lila slept curled against Rook, the dog's tail curved like a comma around her hip, the photograph still under her cheek as if it were a pillow that could dream for her. He moved softly, scanning his shaking hands before he dared touch his phone. The tremor wasn't the cold, it was the echo of night, the stove popping like small arms fire, the door hinge squealing like a mortar's whine. He kept his voice low as he called the county intake line, identified himself the way he'd learned to with social workers since getting home, clearly, calmly, as if the right sequence of syllables could convince the world he was safe to trust. He asked for a welfare check. He asked for discretion. They came faster than he expected. A county SUV nosed through the slush around mid-morning, and with it, a woman in a wool coat the color of a storm. She had bright eyes above a knit scarf and a messenger bag full of forms. Maya Hollis, she said, showing a badge that creaked in its plastic sleeve. Child Protective Services. Lila startled awake and grabbed for Rook's collar, then for the photograph. Maya's face softened. She crouched, so the child didn't have to peer up through a cloud of fear. Hi, Lila. I'm here to make sure you're warm and fed and heard. Can I sit with you a minute? Rook watched Maya, then glanced at Daniel. At his tiny nod, the dog laid his muzzle back on his paws. Lila's shoulders eased a fraction. Maya worked like sunlight slipping under a door, gentle, insistent. She asked if anything hurt. She counted bruises with her eyes, not her fingers. When Lila couldn't find words, Maya let silence collect until they floated up on their own. He locked me outside, Lila said finally, the words brittle. He said I ate too much. He said I was loud. Her thumb traced the photograph's crease. Mum used to say I'm a song, not noise. Maya looked at Daniel over Lila's head, a look that meant both thank you for calling and we're not done yet. Do you know the stepfather's name? Daniel asked. Lila nodded. Brent Garrison. Maya entered it into her tablet, jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "We have prior reports," she said carefully. "Nothing that stuck." She didn't say community resources stretched thin or teachers too busy or neighbors who don't want trouble. She didn't have to. Daniel had already read it in the town's shuttered curtains. A knock rattled the hall door before the wind could. For a heartbeat, Daniel wasn't in the hall. He was in a sand-colored hallway a world away where a knock meant breach, and the air stank of dust and fear, and the next second decided the next year. His breath went shallow. Rook rose in one slow motion and pressed hard against Daniel's thigh, focus slicing through the static. The door swung open. A man filled the frame, broad, with a contractor's fleece and a smile that gelled too slowly on his face. "There you are," he said, and the "you" wasn't just a pronoun, it was a leash. "I've been worried sick. The little one wanders sometimes. We've been having a rough patch since her mother passed. You understand?" He didn't look at Lila when he said mother. He looked at Maya's badge and then at the room like he was taking an inventory of sympathy. "Mr. Garrison?" Maya asked. The smile clicked into place. "Brent." "Yes." He reached toward Lila like a salesman toward a pen. Rook stepped between the hand and the child, posture polite but immovable. Brent froze. Then he laughed like people do when the script doesn't fit. "Whoa, big dog highly trained," Daniel said, voice even, and protective of kids who were locked out in a storm. Brent's eyes flicked to Daniel's scars, to his posture, then back to Maya. "You have to understand," he said smoothly. "Lila has challenges. She makes up stories." He let the words hang like icicles waiting to drop. "I'm the guardian of record. I receive military survivor benefits on her behalf. I'm doing my best." The words hit Daniel like a cold blade. "Survivor benefits?" Maya's stylus paused. She tilted her head the tiniest degree, as if listening to a second conversation under the first. "On what basis are you receiving benefits, Mr. Garrison?" Brent lifted his palms. "Her father died in the service." The paperwork's clean. The photograph in Lila's hands trembled. Daniel saw a uniform pin in the crease, half hidden by time. He thought of midnight stitches in a teddy's seam, of a note tucked safe where small hands could find it. Other lives, other towns, other lies. Maya's mouth thinned. "We need to verify all of this," she said calmly. "Until then, Lila won't be leaving with you." Brent changed temperature so quickly Daniel felt the air shift. "You think you can take her?" he said softly. "You think a soldier and a clipboard tell me what's mine?" It wasn't a question. It was a test. The sound of the door shutting echoed through Daniel's nervous system like a detonator. For a second, his vision narrowed to a tunnel. Then Rook's weight pressed harder, a warm, insistent anchor. Daniel's hands stopped trembling. Maya stood up without standing down. "We'll proceed to the clinic for a forensic exam," she said. "If you have documents to support your claim, bring them to the CPS office at 3. Brent's smile returned like a bruise. "See you there," he said, and left a little too quickly for someone who had nothing to hide. The clinic waited in a strip mall between a laundromat and a locksmith. Inside, the heater thumped like a tired heart. A nurse with silver hair and kind hands met them at triage. "Lila, I'm Anna," she said. "We'll keep everything gentle. Would you like to hold your picture while I check your cuts?" Lila nodded and didn't let go. When the exam reached the places that hurt, Daniel stepped into the hall and counted his breaths. He flinched at a tray clattering, then swallowed the flinch. Maya watched him with the forensic compassion of someone who had seen 2 wounded people try to carry each other across a frozen river. Anna emerged with a printout and a rage she kept inside the lines. "Bruises at different stages of healing," she said. "Exposure risk." "No acute fractures." She touched Lila's shoulder, then looked past her to Daniel. She's tougher than she thinks." "Most kids are," Daniel said, voice low. He avoided the mirror that would show him his own rifle-drawn posture in a medical hallway. Maya tapped her tablet. "We need short-term placement until we can convene an emergency hearing," she said. "I can call Foster." "No," Lila said, so quietly it almost wasn't a word. Rook lifted his head as if he were the only one who heard it fully. Lila pressed the photograph to her chest and whispered, "Please don't move me again." "Please. I'll be quiet, I'll be small." Daniel felt the sentence land like a live round. He looked at Maya. "Temporary kin-like placement," he said, the policy phrase tasting bureaucratic and necessary. "I'm in the VA system, cleared. I have a spare room. The dog's certified." Maya held his gaze. It wasn't a dare, it was a weighing. "Temporary," she said. "I'll file the paperwork and I'll be checking." Often her mouth softened. "And I'll bring groceries that look like cartoons." Sometimes kids eat those when they won't eat anything else. They drove to Daniel's place on the edge of town, a one-story with a porch that had seen better flags. He hadn't expected to open the spare room for anyone but nightmares. He opened it now and found, beneath the dust, a quilt his mother had left, a lamp that still worked, a drawer that could keep a photograph safe. Lila stood in the doorway like she was looking at a stage set for other children's lives. Rook nudged her into motion. She set the photograph carefully on the nightstand, face up. Her mother's smile brightened the room by a watt. Daniel stood in the kitchen with a can of soup and a hand that shook. The can opener slipped and clattered. The sound cracked like a shot. He braced against the counter, eyes shut, breath counting backward. He was aware of Lila in the doorway before he was ready to be. She held her photograph in one hand and Rook's ruff in the other. "Are you hurt?" she asked. He almost lied. Then he didn't. "Sometimes my head goes to loud places," he said. "Sometimes doors and bangs sound like other things. It passes," he forced the opener to behave. "It passes faster when there's someone to keep me in this room." He looked at Rook. "And someone with better ears." Lila climbed onto a chair and watched the soup heat as if the steam were a miracle with a timer. "When it gets loud for me," she said, "I count the freckles on Mom's nose." She held up the photo for him to see. 8. He nodded. "Good number." Maya texted an hour later. Hearing moved up. 3 o'clock. "Attorney will meet you. Do not bring Lila in through the main entrance. Garrison may stage a scene." She added, "And Daniel, be ready. This is a small town with long shadows." The courthouse was a squat building with flags that didn't remember moving. In the parking lot, a man in a peacoat leaned against a sedan with a briefcase like a shield. "Arjun Patel," he said, offering a hand and a quick smile. "Pro bono," Maya called. "I'm the loud friend you bring to quiet rooms." "Daniel," Daniel said. "This is Lila." "And Rook." "Excellent ears," Arjun said to the dog, who approved him in one sniff. Arjun looked at Lila's photograph without staring. "If we do this right, you won't need to count freckles in rooms like these anymore," he said softly. Inside, the hallway smelled like coffee and dust. A deputy nodded at Rook's vest and waved them through a side door to a hearing room that looked like a classroom that had forgotten to hang art. Brent was already there with a man whose suit fit like a strategy. The stepfather's smile was loaded with confidence that didn't check its mirrors. He spread his hands as if welcoming parishioners. "There you are," he said. "See? We're all reasonable people." The hearing officer, a woman with tired eyes and a pen that clicked when she was thinking, took the file from Maya and the file from Garrison's attorney and stacked them like weighing stones. Arjun spoke cleanly. Pattern of neglect, medical documentation, weather report screenshots with lows that turned breath into knives, survivor benefit paperwork that, when subpoenaed, might be less clean than claimed. Brent's attorney countered with phrases like acting in loco parentis and temporary hardship. He shook his head gravely at the idea of trauma as if it were a fad. Through it all, Lila squeezed the photograph and watched the hearing officer like a hawk chick watches the cliff. Rook lay across her shoes, a warm, deliberate weight. Daniel kept his eyes on the table grain when the room's sounds spiked, the stapler, the door hinge, letting his fingertips count the knots like rosary. Beads, Maya slid a sealed envelope to the officer near the end. "There's something else," she said. An anonymous tip. Financial irregularities tied to Brent Garrison's contracting business. Claims filed under a deceased veteran's ID number. The officer raised an eyebrow. "Chain of custody?" "Intake verified details this morning," Maya said. "We need time to pull full records." The officer set the envelope atop the stack and exhaled. "Temporary placement remains with Mr. Reyes," she said, pen poised. "No unsupervised contact for Mr. Garrison until further review. We reconvene in 72 hours. Brent's smile cracked a millimeter. The room's air changed, a pressure drop before a storm. He stood too quickly, chair legs squealing. The sound hit Daniel's spine like a tripwire. He stood too, but Rook was already up, body a barrier between Lila and the men whose faces were doing math. "Enjoy your 3 days," Brent murmured to Daniel in the doorway. The words so soft they were meant to be plausible deniability. "Paper burns. People forget. Parents' days come and go." His eyes slid to Lila and sharpened. "Kids wander." Maya stepped in like a door that had always been there. "We'll leave now," she said. Arjun's hand closed lightly on Brent's sleeve, just enough to remind him that rooms like this remember better than he thinks. They exited through the side corridor Maya had chosen, Rook's nails clicking on linoleum. Outside, the sky had that late winter color that meant the temperature would drop before it rose. Daniel ushered Lila into the truck, buckled her in, and handed her the photograph. Her fingers relaxed by a degree when she saw it safe in her lap. He checked the rear view once, twice, then again against the habit of a man who had spent too long driving through cities where mirrors kept you alive. In the third glance he saw it, a white cargo van idling 3 spaces back, windows too dark for this county, grille pocked with rock scars from long miles. The engine vibrations didn't belong to someone waiting for their wife. Rook's head rose as if a string had pulled it. He turned to the van and did not blink. "Daniel," Lila said, voice small. "Are we going home?" He kept his tone steady. "Yes," he said, even as his foot hovered over the brake, longer than a lie should allow. He watched the van's front tire kiss the parking lot's paint like a predator tasting a boundary. He clicked his blinker left, then right, then left again. Nonsense to anyone else, a code to the dog that meant watch. Wait, ready? The van's engine revved, its nose edged out as if sniffing their route. Rook's lips peeled back just enough to show white. "Seatbelt tight," Daniel said softly. He slid the truck into drive, pulled from the space, and chose a route that wasn't a route at all, past the rear dumpsters, the loading dock, the alley where county vehicles hid. When politics got loud. In the mirror, the white van followed, slow, then not slow. Somewhere behind its tinted glass, someone had decided 72 hours was too long to wait. Lila lifted the photograph and kissed it, as if the paper could bless the road. "Please don't let them take me," she whispered to the person whose eyes she had inherited. "Please don't let me wander again." The van's high beams snapped on, blooming across the mirror like a false sunrise. Daniel's hands were steady now. The tremor had gone somewhere purpose cannot follow. "Rook," he said, and the dog shifted, braced, ready. The alley narrowed to a choked throat of brick and ice. The van accelerated, and in the white flare of those lights, in the breath before impact or escape, the truck, the soldier, the dog, and the girl moved as one. The truck fishtailed on the ice-slick alley, tires shrieking as Daniel yanked the wheel hard right. The white van surged behind, headlights burning into the mirrors like twin suns. Rook braced with claws scraping the seat, his growl vibrating through the cab. Lila clutched her photograph to her chest, eyes wide, voice no louder than a prayer. "Hold on," Daniel muttered, his breath steaming the windshield. His knuckles whitened around the wheel. The old Ford wasn't built for high speed, but instinct and muscle memory, years of evasive maneuvers on roads halfway across the world, took over. The alley spat them out onto a back road lined with shuttered shops. The van followed. Daniel's pulse hammered, his vision narrowed, colors flattening to the same palette as dust and fire, and old battles he had sworn never to see again. The van's engine roared, and for a split second the sound was mortar shells, not tires. His chest tightened, his breath snagged. Rook whined sharply, nudging Daniel's arm with his muzzle, an anchor back to the present. Daniel blinked, refocusing. Snow, not sand. A child, not a squad. Drive. He slammed the gear down and turned onto an icy service road. The van mirrored every move. "Why are they chasing us?" Lila cried, voice trembling. Daniel didn't answer right away. He couldn't. Not with truth she wasn't ready for, and not with lies she'd never believe. Instead, he said, "Because they know we won't let them hurt you again." Rook barked once, sharp and fierce, punctuating the promise. The van drew closer, grille almost kissing the truck's bumper. A window slid down. Daniel caught the glint of something metallic. He swerved, just as a shot cracked, the bullet sparking against the side panel. Lila screamed, ducking low and curling around her photograph like a shield. Daniel's teeth ground together. "Not again. Not on my watch." He jerked the wheel toward the old mill road, snowbanks towering like walls on either side. The van followed too fast, too close. Another gunshot echoed. This one punched through the back window, spraying glass across the cab. Rook barked furiously, standing over Lila as shards tinkled onto the seat. Daniel felt the world tilt again, his mind flickering to a convoy in Afghanistan, an IED blast tearing through metal, comrades' screams drowned in dust. His hands faltered. "Daniel!" Lila's voice cut through, small but urgent. "Stay here." "Don't go away." Her words pulled him back, the same way Rook's nudge had minutes before. He locked onto her eyes in the rearview mirror, wide, wet, but alive. Counting freckles on her mother's photograph had kept her steady once. Now she was keeping him steady. Daniel forced a long breath. "I'm here, kid. I'm here." The mill road ended in a collapsed bridge. Daniel saw it too late. The barricade loomed out of the snow, jagged wood and a sheer drop beyond. His heart seized. No room to break. No time to turn. "Rook, brace!" he shouted. The dog dropped instantly, covering Lila with his body. Daniel cranked the wheel, sending the truck into a violent skid. Tires screamed against the ice, the rear fishtailing toward the barrier. The truck spun sideways, slammed into a snowbank, and stopped with a bone-rattling jolt. The van barreled down the road, momentum too strong to stop. Daniel saw it in slow motion, the driver's panicked swerve, the wheels catching ice, the nose slamming through the barricade. Metal shrieked. The van teetered on the edge, then plunged into the gorge below. A hollow crash echoed, followed by silence broken only by the hiss of settling snow. Daniel sat frozen, breath ragged, pulse hammering in his ears. "Daniel," Lila whispered, her voice shaking. He turned. She was curled against Rook, her photograph still clutched tight. Her cheeks were streaked with tears but unbroken. Rook licked her hand, his tail thumping once, as if to remind her she wasn't alone. Daniel reached over, brushing snow-dusted glass from her hair. "You okay?" She nodded quickly, though her eyes betrayed the fear still trapped inside her. "They won't come back, right?" Daniel exhaled, watching the snows swallow the last trace of the van below. "Not from there," he said, though his gut twisted with the knowledge that Brent Garrison's reach stretched further than one vehicle of hired men. They limped back to town, the truck wheezing like an old soldier who'd given too much. Daniel parked behind the CPS office, out of sight from the main road. Maya rushed out as soon as she saw them, her scarf half falling from her shoulder. "What happened?" she demanded, ushering Lila inside. "Garrison isn't just playing Guardian," Daniel said, voice grim. "He's got muscle." "Real muscle." Armed Maya's face hardened. "Then we escalate. Detective Ramos owes me a favor. We'll open a criminal line." Lila tugged on Maya's sleeve, holding up the photograph. "He was trying to take this," she said, voice trembling. "He doesn't want me to have it." Maya crouched, brushing hair from Lila's face. "Then we'll make sure it stays yours, sweetheart." No one takes away what matters most. Rook leaned against the girl's leg, his steady warmth backing the promise. Later, when the adrenaline had thinned to exhaustion, Daniel sat in the office waiting room with his head in his hands. Rook pressed against his thigh, grounding him in silence. Through the glass partition, he saw Maya talking with Arjun Patel, the attorney. They pored over documents, whispered urgently, their faces sharp with focus. Every so often they glanced toward him and Lila. The girl sat on the floor nearby, Rook's head on her lap. She smoothed the dog's ears with one hand while clutching the photograph with the other. Her lips moved in a whisper, words Daniel barely caught. "Daddy's not dead. I know it. I know it." The whisper hit him harder than the bullets had. Daniel looked at the photograph again, at the man in uniform whose smile mirrored Lila's eyes. And in his chest, something he'd buried years ago stirred, a dangerous thing he'd once called hope. Detective Ramos had a voice like gravel and tired coffee. He arrived at CPS with his collar turned up against the wind, eyes squinting as if the snow itself were a suspect. He listened without interrupting while Daniel described the van, the shots, the bridge, and the way the engine note in his skull had almost dragged him under. He asked 3 questions that mattered: plate, driver, distinguishing damage, then scribbled no plate and front grille pocked into his notebook. "Contract work crews use vans like that," Ramos said, closing the notebook with a patient clack. "You can rent anonymity by the day at the industrial park. I'll pull traffic cams along the mill road." He turned to Lila, who sat with Rook's head on her lap and her photo in both hands. "You were brave," he said simply. "Brave isn't not scared. Brave is being scared and staying." Lila glanced at Daniel, then at Maya, then back to Ramos. "They want to take my picture," she said. "He doesn't want me to have it." Ramos knelt, careful to keep his hands visible, careful the way good cops are around children with too many reasons to jump. "Then keep it close," he said. "Sometimes the smallest things tell the biggest truths." Arjun arrived a minute later with a slim folder and a pen he twirled when he was thinking. "We moved the court clock," he said, flipping pages. "Next hearing is in 48 hours, not 72. I've filed a petition to freeze the disbursement of survivor benefits pending verification." He slid a sheet to Maya. "We'll need Lila's birth certificate, the mother's death certificate. Anna can help track down the hospital, and any record of the father's service." His glance settled on Daniel. "If you know anyone at the VA who'll pick up the phone when a civilian calls, now's the time." Daniel swallowed. He did. He also knew what it cost to call in favors from men who had learned to ration attention the way they once rationed water. "I'll try," he said. Ramos checked his watch. "I'll send a patrol past your place tonight," he told Daniel, "but don't count on the uniform to be faster than trouble. Keep lights on, stay off predictable routes. If anyone knocks after dark, check the peephole and still don't open." "Copy," Daniel said, and hated how natural the word felt in his mouth in a civilian building. They left the CPS office through the back door, Rook slanting his body to block the wind from Lila as they crossed the lot. A car idled at the far curb, its driver half-turned, phone to ear. The window didn't drop, the engine didn't rev, nothing illegal to feed a report. Daniel watched anyway until they were 3 turns away. At home, he made grilled cheese, the only way he knew how. Too much butter, the pan too hot. The smell filled the kitchen like a memory that had never belonged to him. Lila ate with both hands, quiet and intent, her photograph propped on the salt shaker so her mother could sit with them. Rook lay with his chin on the tile and his eyes on the door. Midway through the second sandwich, Lila looked up. "At school," she said, words careful, as if she were assembling something breakable. "There's a Parent Day Thursday. We bring someone and we tell about our families. Mrs. McKay says, I can bring a neighbor or anyone who loves me, and shows up. She paused. Will you still come? Even if he gets mad? Even if people look at us funny? Daniel felt something small and hard and long buried crack. Yes, he said. I promised. I'll be there. And if anyone looks at us funny, we'll look back until they remember how to see. Rook huffed as if in agreement. Lila giggled, the first pure sound he'd heard from her, and then quickly smothered it with a hand, as if joy might summon trouble the way light summons moths. Later, while she coloured at the table, drawing a dog with ears the size of optimism, Daniel took the photograph to the window for better light. The man beside Lila's mother wore a uniform whose cut belonged to a handful of units. The corner of a patch peeked out from beneath his arm, a hint of a lightning bolt inside a shield, not conclusive, but enough to tug. He flipped the photo over. The back was blank except for a faint smear that could have been glue or something once written and erased. He set the photo in a shallow bowl of air above the radiator, not quite touching the heat, the way he'd seen field reports coax invisible ink into legibility. A minute passed, then another. Maya texted, Dr. Anna's scanning hospital records. Mother admitted 3 months prior for pneumonia. No father listed. Arjun texted, initial VA search shows no confirmed KIA under that surname in state logs from last 5 years. Might be living, or MIA more soon. Daniel shifted the photo, fingers careful not to scorch the corners. A pale line surfaced, then another. Words ghosted up like breath on glass. Alive! Do not trust Brent. Ellis has keys. He stared until the letters steadied. Ellis. The name had the weight of a door you've walked through 100 times without seeing the hinges. In this town there were 2 Ellises who mattered. Pastor Hal Ellis, who shook hands so firmly on Sundays that it left folks feeling forgiven, and Coach Ellis, whose whistle could part a gym like the Red Sea. Pastor. Keys, the phrase clicked in a grim way. Churches collected keys the way secrets collected dust. Daniel? Lila stood at his elbow, crayons in hand, eyes a little unsure. Did you burn it? No, he said, forcing his voice to stay easy. He turned the photo so she could see the faint writing. Did your mum ever leave you secret messages? Lila's mouth made a small O. We had a code, she whispered. She'd write on napkins with lemon. You had to warm it up to read it. She said games make scary things less scary. Her finger hovered over the word, alive. He's alive? I think someone wanted us to think so, Daniel said, refusing to overpromise, refusing to crush the spark either. And they wanted us to know not to trust Brent. Do you know an Ellis? She frowned. Pastor Hal. He came after Mom's funeral. He said God would make a way. He brought casseroles with crunchy stuff on top. He told Brent we should be grateful for men who stay. Her voice found an edge. He didn't ask me if I stayed. Daniel's jaw tightened. He took a photo of the message with his phone and sent it to Maya and Arjun with a single line. From Lila's photo, appeared under heat. Maya responded with a 3-word lightning strike. Church office now. Arjun, I'll meet you there with a warrant draft. We can't search, but we can rattle. They parked 2 blocks from the church, not because Daniel was paranoid, but because experience had taught him that to be called paranoid was often an insult handed to the prepared by the unprepared. Snow squeaked underfoot as they crossed. The church's brick was clean in the way buildings get when everyone volunteers for the parts of faith you can see. The office light glowed. A sandwich board out front read, Community Vigil, Thursday, 6 p.m. Pray for our town in cursive that made prayer look like a bake sale. Pastor Hal Ellis opened the door before they could knock, as if the bell had whispered their names. He was all warmth and wool, his smile practiced, but not entirely false. Maya, he said, and you must be Mr. Reyes. We've heard of your service. His hand lingered half a beat too long on Daniel's shoulder, like a blessing that wanted to be a brand. And this must be brave, Lila. We've been lifting you up. Rook inserted himself between the blessing and the blessings target with the precision of an usher. The pastor's hand withdrew, as if he'd touched a stove. "Big dog," he said lightly. "God's creatures can be spirited." "We're following up on a lead," Maya said, stepping into the lobby without waiting for a welcome. "We need to confirm if Mr. Garrison has any access here." Pastor Hal laughed, the kind of chuckle that greased hinges. "Oh, Brent! He helps with maintenance, snow shoveling, changing light bulbs. The Lord blesses the practical. He has keys to the back entry because he comes early. Nothing nefarious. Why?" Maya didn't answer. She looked at the board with the week's activities: food pantry, youth choir, custodial schedule, B. Garrison, Thursday, Friday. She took a photo. "We'll need to speak to the treasurer," she said, "and see the key log." "You'd need a warrant to see private documents," Pastor Hal said, the edge peeking through the woven warmth. "We're happy to cooperate, of course." But was this really necessary? Bringing a child into the middle of... He gestured vaguely, gracefully, at the mess of adult failings. Lila stepped forward before anyone could shape the air around her. "You told me to be grateful," she said, small and clear. "For men who stay." She held up the photograph. "He stayed with me. He brought soup and didn't shout. He taught me that braver isn't quieter." Pastor Hal's cheeks flushed, then smoothed. "We're all doing our best," he said, which is something people say when they know they've done exactly enough to be invited and not enough to be indicted. Arjun slipped in, cheeks red from the cold, briefcase latch clicking like punctuation. "Pastor," he said with courtroom cheer, "good to see you. You'll of course understand the optics if it turns out Mr. Garrison used church access to facilitate anything untoward. If you were unaware, you'll want to demonstrate robust cooperation." He turned to Maya, all brisk efficiency. "We'll draft a subpoena for the key log and volunteer schedules. Detective Ramos can serve." Rook sniffed the baseboard to the left of the office door, then stopped, nose lifted. He breathed, turned his head, breathed again. The dog's tail stiffened, not with aggression, but with recognition. He eased forward, sniffed the door jamb, then looked back at Daniel and gave a short, silent, alert behavior. One paw lifted, head cocked. Trained on explosives and accelerants once upon a time, Rook had a nose that kept secrets from staying secret. Daniel kneeled, bent close. A thin, sweet chemical threaded the air. Memory and scent met halfway in his brain. Lamp oil? Number? Something modern. A whiff of accelerant, the kind used by people who wanted fires to look like accidents. He stood slowly. "Smells like someone had a project back here recently," he said, voice neutral. Watching. The pastor's pupils did a thing pupils do when they measure exits. "Custodial closet," Pastor Hal said quickly, too quickly. "We replaced the floor polish. Strong stuff." He moved to open the door. Rook stepped in his path, and even Pastor Hal knew enough language not to argue with a dog whose ancestors worked border crossings in war. Maya absorbed the moment, then smoothed it over before it splintered. "We'll be in touch," she said, professional and cool. "Please ask your treasurer to expect our request." Back outside, Daniel exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The church bells chimed the hour with a cheerfulness that felt like bad timing. Lila's mitten found Rook's rough. "If he has keys," she said, "does he have keys to us?" "No one has keys to you," Daniel said. "Not anymore." They reached the truck at dusk, the sky bruising into early night. On the porch at home, the mailbox was stuffed with flyers, the glossy sheen catching the last light. Daniel pulled them free and sifted. Pizza coupons, a hardware sale, a flyer announcing Community Vigil Thursday, bring your families. A scrap of paper fell from between the pages. He stooped, 4 words in block letters. Paper burns, people too. Rook's growl was almost inaudible. Daniel's gaze leapt from the paper to the windows, the eaves, the shadowed corners, like a man reacquainting himself with an old enemy. He ushered Lila inside with a calm he did not feel, checked the rooms, the doors, the crawlspace hatch. Night settled, and with it the kind of quiet that has teeth. Maya texted that Ramos had a unit circling and that she'd emailed the district attorney. Arjun sent a photo of the subpoena paperwork. Anna, the nurse, messaged a picture of a lime and a candle with the caption, "For your napkin codes, kiddo." The town thrummed with the people who were trying. It also throbbed with the people who weren't. Lila brushed her teeth in exaggerated circles. Rook posted like a sentry by the bathroom door. "Can the dog sleep in my room?" she asked, a question that sounded like a hand testing ice. "He'll refuse to do anything else," Daniel said. He tucked her in beneath the quilt that all at once looked like a flag for a country that had not yet learned its anthem. She slid the photograph under her pillow and turned her face into it the way flowers turn toward the sun. "If my dad is alive," she whispered to the cotton, "maybe he'll come on Parent Day too." Then, more softly, almost too soft to catch, "But if not, it's okay. I have a soldier." Daniel backed to the door, turned off the light, and let the hall nightlight paint the world in small mercy. He was pouring water into the kettle when a sound split the house in two. A crack that wasn't glass, a thump that wasn't a door. Rook launched from the bedroom in a brown comet, claws skittering on hardwood, Daniel's body following before his mind caught up. Another sound, lower, rolling, clunk, fizz, hiss. Smoke crept under the back door in a thin grey ribbon. Something metallic tapped, against the threshold, spinning to a stop with a wicked little clink. A canister. The hiss swelled. "Lila!" Daniel shouted, sprinting down the hall as Rook veered for the kitchen. The dog's teeth closed on the canister and flung it back into the mudroom, buying seconds that cost courage. The hiss stuttered, then thickened into a fog. Daniel burst into the bedroom as Lila sat bolt upright, eyes wild, photograph clutched in both fists. The first tendrils of smoke curled under the door. Rook slammed his body against it from the other side, barking in a rhythm that was both warning and promise. "Up!" Daniel said, scooping Lila with one arm, the other hand snatching the damp towel from her desk to shove under the door seam. Smoke alarms screamed, and in their shrill chorus, his brain tried to march him back into a sandstorm years away. He closed his eyes a heartbeat, opened them in this house, this night, this child. The kitchen window shattered somewhere behind Rook's bark, a fresh draft turning smoke into a river. "Hold on," Daniel told Lila, the same 2 words he'd used on the ice road, the same 2 words he'd once called over rotor wash to men who couldn't hear him but ran anyway. He felt her little hand knot into his collar like an anchor. He yanked the bedroom window up, cold knifed in, clean and bright. Outside, the porch light swung on its chain, casting dizzy ovals on the snow. A figure slid along the fence line, a shadow with a plan. Rook threw his weight against the door again, bought another second, bought another breath, and as the smoke thickened, as the house filled with alarms and the night filled with someone else's intention, Daniel lifted Lila toward the window, and Rook coiled for a leap, all 3 of them moving toward whatever waited on the other side. The night was a mouthful of smoke and snow. Daniel shoved Lila through the window frame first, careful of the jagged edge where the latch had snapped. She landed in the drift below with a muffled cry, her photograph clutched so tightly the corners bent. Rook sprang after her, hitting the snow with a grunt, then immediately circling to shield her. Daniel swung himself out last. Heat licked at his boots as the curtains behind him began to glow orange. He landed hard on the ice, knees jolting, and pulled Lila against his chest. The porch light swung wildly above them, casting stripes across the yard. The shadow near the fence was gone. "Stay low," he barked, dropping into a crouch that shielded the girl with his body. Rook pressed close, his growl low and steady, vibrating through the snow into Daniel's bones. From the back door came a whoosh and a bloom of fire. The accelerant had found its throat. Flames climbed, greedy and fast, painting the night in violent light. Maya's SUV barreled into the driveway, headlights slicing through smoke. She jumped out before it stopped rolling, phone in one hand, flashlight in the other. "Get in!" she shouted. Daniel bundled Lila into the back seat, Rook leaping in beside her. The dog wedged his body between the child and the door, as if nothing short of a wrecking ball would move him. Maya floored it. The house shrank in the rearview mirror, windows breaking in bursts of orange. "Dispatch has engines en route," she said, voice clipped. "But we need to assume this wasn't random." "Not random," Daniel said flatly. His hands shook, the memory of smoke alarms welded to gunfire alarms in his head. He clenched them until the tremor slowed. "He's escalating. He won't stop until—" He glanced at Lila, who pressed her face into Rook's fur. He didn't finish the sentence. Maya's phone buzzed. She swore under her breath and answered. "Detective Ramos, talk." She listened, then swore again. "Copy. We'll come direct." She hung up, jaw tight. "The church burned too." Custodial closet. Same accelerant. Daniel's stomach sank. "Ellis has keys." The words on the photograph seared in his mind. The police station was half lit, the air thick with burnt coffee and stress. Ramos met them at the door, coat unbuttoned, tie loose. He didn't waste time. "2 fires in 2 hours. Same signature. Whoever's behind this isn't just cleaning up evidence. They're warning us to back off." "Not working," Maya said. "Not even close," Daniel added. Ramos guided them into an interview room, more comfortable than an interrogation. Arjun was already inside, papers spread across the table. He looked up, grim. Bank records came in. Garrison's contracting business billed the county for disaster repairs that never happened. Guess who signed off on the work orders? Maya folded her arms. "Pastor Ellis." Arjun nodded. "Custodial supplies, maintenance access, false invoices, all rubber-stamped by him. Brent got the cash, Ellis got a cut. Survivor benefits funneled into the same account. This isn't just neglect. It's organized theft, hiding under the guise of faith and family." Daniel glanced at Lila, asleep against Rook on the floor, photograph still in her grip. "She's in the middle of it. They'll keep coming until she's silenced, or disappears." Ramos tapped his notebook. "We'll file charges, push for warrants, but you know how small towns work. Judges golf with pastors. People don't want their choir leader in handcuffs." He looked at Daniel squarely. "That means we need her safe until we get something bulletproof." "I'll keep her safe," Daniel said. His voice didn't waver. They moved Lila to a safe house on the edge of town, a sheriff-owned cabin used for witness protection. It smelled of cedar and dust, but the locks were solid and the snow around it was unbroken. Daniel settled her on the couch with a blanket and Rook beside her. She stirred awake, blinking at the unfamiliar walls. "Where are we?" "Somewhere no one can find you," Daniel said, gently. She nodded, then held out the photograph. "Can you keep it safe for me? Just while I sleep?" He hesitated, then took it, sliding it into his jacket pocket as though it were a medal. "I'll guard it with my life." Her lips quivered, and she whispered, "That's what Daddy used to say." The words pierced him. He leaned closer. "Then maybe we've got more in common than I thought." She smiled faintly and drifted back to sleep. Rook rested his head on her lap, eyes never leaving the door. The night was long. Daniel sat by the window, rifle across his knees, every creak of the cabin board setting his nerves on edge. His thoughts spiraled, ghosts crowding in, men he couldn't save, children crying in languages he never learned, fire-eating villages the way it now ate his house. A small sound pulled him back, barely audible. Lila, whispering in her sleep. He leaned closer, hearing words shaped by dreams. "Daddy's not dead. He'll come. He'll come." The photograph pressed against his chest suddenly felt heavier. Daniel exhaled, rubbing his temple. Maybe it was fantasy, the child's desperate hope. Or maybe it was the clue they hadn't yet deciphered. Either way, it was a promise he had to keep alive. Morning came with pale light and tire tracks in the snow outside the cabin. Fresh. Daniel's pulse spiked. He reached for his rifle, signaling Rook. The dog was already at the window, ears pricked, a low growl curling in his throat. Lila stirred, clutching the blanket tighter. "What is it?" "Nothing you need to worry about," Daniel said, though his tone betrayed the lie. Outside, the tracks veered toward the tree line and stopped. No car, no van, just silence. But in the snow near the porch lay a scrap of paper weighed down by a stone. Daniel eased the door open, Rook at his side, and retrieved it. The handwriting was sharp, deliberate. "Parent Day is Thursday. She won't make it." The scrap of paper felt colder than the snow. "Parent Day is Thursday. She won't make it." Daniel folded it once, then again, the creases biting his gloves. Rook's lips lifted from his teeth in a silent snarl. Amber eyes locked on the tree line. Lila watched him from the couch, the blanket drawn up to her chin, the photograph pressed beneath it like a heartbeat. Maya arrived within the hour, with coffee that steamed in the cabin's cold air, and a fury she kept zipped under her coat. Detective Ramos followed with a camera and evidence bags. He photographed the tire tracks, the stone, the note, then placed the paper inside plastic as if it could still bite. "They want you rattled," he said. "They also want you predictable. Don't give them either." "Parent Day is tomorrow," Lila whispered, so softly Daniel almost missed it. "You promised." Daniel knelt in front of her. "I'm keeping that promise," he said. The words left no room for negotiation. "We'll get you there. We'll get you home." Together, Rook nudged Lila's knee, and she slid her fingers into the fur at his neck, anchoring herself there. Arjun arrived with a printer, still warm from the car. "Emergency motion," he said, slapping paperwork down on the table. "Temporary protective order, motion to freeze benefit disbursements, request for expedited warrants on the church accounts. Judge Haynes is in chambers. If we get lucky, we'll have orders before noon." He glanced at the note bagged on the table. Luck's relative. "Let's make our own." They made a plan because that's what scared people do to stop becoming prey. A morning convoy to the school with 2 patrol cars bookending Daniel's truck. Maya meeting them at the side entrance Mrs. McKay had promised to keep clear. Ramos's plainclothes officer posted in the lobby, Arjun working the judge, Daniel off the mains on side roads, eyes on mirrors. Rook would wear his vest and his badge. Ayla would carry her photograph in a hard plastic sleeve Maya returned from her car, like armor. When arrangements were done and paper signed and phones charged, fatigue came for them like fog. Daniel took first watch by the window, rifle across his thighs, Rook stretched along the wall, chin on his paws, one ear cocked. The cabin ticked and sighed, pipes hummed, the wind pressed its face to the glass and peered in. The world dwindled to the shape of the 3 of them, a soldier too tired to sleep, a dog who pretended to, and a child whose dreams kept asking the same question, and, by some stubborn grace, kept answering it with hope. Near dawn, Daniel drifted. A slam from the wood stove had him in a crater half a world away, sand in his mouth and a door blown off its hinges. His chest locked. Then a warm weight shoved against his thigh. Rook, steady, insistent, and the vision shattered. He let out a breath he did not know he had been holding, pressed his palm to the dog's skull, and whispered, "Here." "I'm here by 7. They were rolling. The convoy moved through grey light and breath frost, past houses that pretended nothing burned last night. At a gas station, Daniel pulled in despite every instinct, because fuel gauges don't care about instincts. He kept the engine idling. Rook's nose worked the air, his muscles slithered beneath his coat as if his skin were listening too. Lila sat forward, finger on the plastic sleeve. "Can I show Mrs. McKay the picture? The code?" She lifted the photo, eyes bright with new knowledge. "About the lemon?" "About the heat. You can show her the picture," Daniel said. "We keep the code between us and Maya for now." She nodded solemnly, then pointed. "Hot chocolate?" He checked the lot. 2 cars by the vacuum station, a pickup with a plough and a driver reading a paper. A white utility van with its rear doors marked by mud and a dent. His jaw tightened. "We'll bring it to the truck," he said. He jogged inside, bought hot chocolate with too many marshmallows and pretzels in neon cheese, guilt and love measured in sugar and salt. Back at the pump, he kept his eyes on the mirror while sliding his card. The van door popped a fraction. Rook's growl was instantaneous, the low, coiled warning of an animal bred for purpose. "Eyes front," Daniel said. Lila stiffened, clutching the sleeve. The van door eased open another inch. "Rook, watch!" The dog rotated, every line of him pointed at the gap. A hand shot from the van, tossing something under Daniel's truck, too small for a pipe bomb, too heavy for trash. Instinct did the rest. "Out!" he barked, too loud, and Lila flinched. He took a breath, forced calm back into his tone. "Good job, kid. Slide to my side." Now, she obeyed without spilling her drink, moving as much through Rook's body language as Daniel's words. Ramos's cruiser slid into the lot as if conjured. The utility van eased away, casual as a shopper, then, seeing the cruiser, fled, tires squealing. Ramos went for the tail. Daniel dropped to his belly to look under the truck. A black puck with adhesive blinked a drowsy red. "Tracker," he said, and peeled it free with the keys between his fingers. He slapped it to the snowplow's bumper as the driver emerged, confused, coffee in hand. "Compliments of the county?" Daniel said without smiling. The driver blinked, then laughed despite himself. "Hell of a morning." They rolled again, Daniel's hands steady now that he had something simple to beat. Rook thumped his tail once as if to say, "Good catch, old man." Lila sipped hot chocolate with both hands, like a pilgrim at a spring. At the school, Mrs. McKay met them by the side door with a knit hat shaped like a bee. "You found a hero, didn't you?" she told Lila, the words gentle but sure. "And one with 4 legs too." She leaned down to stroke Rook's shoulder. "Hello, officer." Inside, the halls smelled like pencil shavings and disinfectant. Posters for Parent Day fluttered on the walls, crayon family portraits, stick figures holding hands under improbable suns. Lila traced a finger over one labeled, "My family equals me, plus mom, plus star dog." Her mouth pulled into a smile that tried to be brave and almost got there. Nurse Bell ushered them into the health office for a quick check. "We'll get you a warm pack for those hands," she told Lila, voice the kind reserved for kids and storm-wounded animals. She glanced at Daniel. "And if your soldier looks tired, I've got packets of tea I'll pretend help." Daniel took one and pretended 2. Maya and a plainclothes officer named Jenna posted at the lobby. Arjun texted a photo of a stamped court order, temporary protective custody, placement with Daniel Reyes. He added, "We did it, for now." Daniel felt the paper through the phone as if it had weight. It did. In the gym, folding chairs fanned like a ripple. The stage was dressed in butcher paper painted with trees and a banner that read, "Parent Day, Our Stories." Principal Green, a woman whose handshake was a mission statement, shook Daniel's hand and thanked him for his service without making it a bumper sticker. "We're honored you're here," she said, and looked like she meant it. "We've increased staff at exits. Officer Jenner will be at the east door, Coach Ellis at the west, and I'll be everywhere." She moved on before he could wince at the name. Coach Ellis, barrel-chested, whistle coiled like a snake at his sternum, gave Daniel a thumbs up. "We got this, brother," he said, chest bumping the air in a way that felt like theater. Rook watched him the way a mathematician watches a coin trick, unimpressed. Rehearsal began. Kids gulped lines into microphones, voices small and enormous at once. When it was Lila's turn, she stood behind the mic like it might bite, then glanced at Daniel and Rook. He touched 2 fingers to his heart, and then to her. Rook sat straighter, as if bracing the air. Lila swallowed, lifted the photograph in its sleeve, and said, clear enough to reach the rafters, "This is my mum. She told me I'm a song, not noise. A soft O rippled the chairs. "This is my—" She glanced at Daniel, eyes wet. "This is my soldier. He keeps promises. And this is Rook. He is brave with me when I forget how it wasn't a speech so much as a map. People clapped the way you clap for a child finding her way out of a forest." During the break, Principal Green tugged Daniel aside, face grave. "We had a voicemail early," she said, "from Pastor Hal. He suggested we reserve an honor seat for Mr. Garrison, said he's been unfairly maligned and should be allowed to participate. I told him policy says only approved guardians may attend." "What time?" Maya asked, appearing like a shadow that had learned to talk. 6:30 a.m., Green said, "and there's something else." Our sign-in sheet printed with his name, already filled in, next to a forged signature. The font's wrong. We shredded it. Maya's jaw flexed. "Copy the network queue. People forget the server keeps ghosts." In the corridor to the restrooms, a woman with a staff badge intercepted Lila with a smile that was all sugar and no salt. "Sweetie, Mrs. McKay asked me to take you to the art room to pick out a frame for your picture," she said. "I'm Ms. Carrow, counselor." Rook stepped between them before Lila could answer. The dog's tail hung neutral, but his stance said no. Ms. Carrow's smile wobbled, then doubled down. "It's okay, handsome," she cooed, without looking at the holder of the leash. "I love dogs." "Daniel?" Lila asked, fingers sinking into Rook's ruff. "Thanks," Daniel said evenly. "We'll all go." Ms. Carrow's eyes flicked, left, then right. Too fast. She recovered. "Of course." The art room was 2 doors down. Its lights were off. Ms. Carrow jiggled the handle. Must be locked. "I'll grab the key from Coach." She glided away. Her shoes didn't squeak. That was the only sound missing in a school hall full of tile. Rook sniffed the doorframe, then the floor, then looked up at Daniel and lifted a paw. Alert. Daniel leaned closer. Bleach. Recent. Sharp. Masking scent. His stomach went cold. Jenna's voice hit their earpieces a second later. The school had permitted the team to use radios for the day. "West lot, white utility van circling," she said. "No plates." Lights off. Coach Ellis's voice overlapped, tinny and too loud in the gym. "All right, folks, places." The PA system crackled. Then everything went dark. Kids squealed, then laughed the way kids do when they think adults are in control. Adults swore softly. Emergency lights hiccuped, then came on in an anemic strip down the main hall, leaving islands of shadow where doors met corners. "Stay with me," Daniel said, hand on Lila's shoulder. Rook pressed tight to the girl's leg. The dog's fur bristled under Daniel's palm. From the east stairwell, a door latch clicked, not the sound of normal, not the rhythm of staff. Rook's head snapped toward it, footsteps, soft and fast. A whisper, urgent and wrong. "This way." Daniel felt the air change, the same pressure drop he'd learned to fear before impact. He slid his free hand to the radio. "Maya, east stairwell," he said. "Movement." "Keep Green with the kids." "On my way," Maya answered. "Ramos has the west." "Jenna's with me." The emergency lights flickered once more, then steadied. In that stutter of dark, Lila's hand found Daniel's sleeve. Her breath brushed his wrist. "If you can't come," she whispered, her voice tinier than he had ever heard it, "I'll still say you're mine." "I'm coming," he said, and the words felt heavier than any oath he'd ever spoken in uniform. A shape slid across the far end of the corridor, tall, hooded, a key card flashing in a hand that hadn't earned it. The east door clicked again, then began to swing. "Rook," Daniel breathed. The canine surged, silent until sound would matter, muscle and intent moving before thought could argue. Daniel moved with him, Lila's small fingers locked to his sleeve. The door finished its swing, and beyond it, the stairwell yawned into shadow where feet waited to either run or wrestle. The white van's engine growled outside like an animal scenting blood. In the suspended second between motion and collision, the school, its banners, its folding chairs, its kids' crayon suns, held its breath, and then the stairwell exploded with footsteps, The stairwell erupted in chaos, boots pounding, the screech of metal against concrete, a door slamming open to the night. Daniel shoved Lila behind him, rifle-quick reflexes surging back after years of suppression. Rook launched into the half-lit corridor, intercepting the first figure. As they lunged forward, the dog hit center mass, jaws locking on an arm, dragging the intruder to the floor with a cry muffled by a mask. "Stay down!" Daniel barked, pressing Lila into the alcove of a doorway. She clutched her photograph so tightly the plastic sleeve bent, her knuckles white. Another figure burst through the stairwell, this one faster, aiming for the side exit. Maya appeared at the far end of the hall, weapon drawn, her voice clear and cutting. "Police! On the ground!" The intruder bolted instead, shoulder-checking the crash bar and vanishing into the night. A chorus of shouts and footfalls followed, Ramos outside, officers converging, tires screaming as the white van peeled away into the lot. Rook snarled, still pinning his quarry. Daniel moved fast, pulling zip ties from his belt. He secured the man's wrists, yanked the mask free, and revealed a face smeared with grease and fear. Not Garrison, not Ellis, a hired shadow. "Talk!" Daniel snapped. The man spat blood into the tile. "You can't stop him. He's already set the fire." Daniel's heart stuttered. "What fire?" The man grinned, teeth red. The church was practice. The house was proof. Tonight's the main act. Maya crouched, voice low, but lethal. "Where?" He just laughed until Rook bared teeth inches from his face. The laugh cut off. Still, silence. Principal Green hustled the children into classrooms, staff locking doors, trying to keep Parent Day from becoming headline day. "We've rehearsed fire drills," she told them, voice too calm, too loud. "We're safe." Daniel swept Lila into his arms. Her breath came in shallow bursts, eyes darting between his face and the halls. "Are we going to burn?" she whispered. "No," he said fiercely. "Not while I breathe." Rook barked once, sharp, signaling something new. The dog's nose lifted, tracking the air. Daniel's chest clenched. He knew that stance. He smelled it too now, thin, chemical, creeping through the ventilation like a memory of war. Accelerant. "Smoke system," Maya said, realizing at the same time. "They seeded it." Ramos's voice crackled through the radio. "Basement boiler room compromised." Sprinkler lines cut. "They want the whole building. Evac," Maya ordered. "Now!" The gym became chaos again, but this time no one laughed. Teachers herded children toward the main exits. Daniel carried Lila, weaving through panicked parents, Rook clearing a path with his presence alone. The air thickened with the stench of fuel. Somewhere below, fire alarms screamed as the first flames licked upward. In the crush of bodies, Daniel saw him, Brent Garrison. Standing near the west doors, a forged staff badge on his chest, his smile calm in the panic. He didn't move to flee, he just watched Lila, eyes locking on her as if she were a ledger line he meant to balance. Daniel froze mid-stride. Rage surged like an old battlefield tide. Brent raised a hand, not in greeting, but in possession. Rook snarled, pulling Daniel back from the brink. He remembered, Lila in his arms, the photograph against her chest, the oath he had already spoken. Not revenge, rescue. He barreled toward the east exit instead. Maya flanked them, shouting orders. Ramos's team stormed the basement, smoke rolling up the stairwells. Brent disappeared into the press of parents, his smile lingering like the taste of ash. They burst into the parking lot just as the first flames clawed through the roof. Children screamed, sirens wailed, the white van reappeared, barreling across the lot. Doors slid open, figures inside reaching for Lila. Rook leapt without command, hitting the first figure mid-chest, dragging him onto the asphalt. Daniel spun, shielding Lila as another lunged for her. His fist connected, years of combat focus distilled into one punch. The man folded. The van screeched as Ramos's cruiser slammed into its flank. Metal shrieked, glass shattered. Officers swarmed, pulling men from the wreck. Daniel dropped to one knee, holding Lila against his chest. She shook violently, but her voice broke through the roar. "Daddy's not dead," she whispered. "I saw him." "I know it. He's coming." The photograph slipped from its sleeve, fluttering in the wind. Daniel caught it. On the back, in heat-blurred letters, another line appeared beneath the first message, revealed by the fire's warmth. "Ellis hides him. Find the basement." Daniel's breath froze. Pastor Ellis. Keys. Basement. Alive. Maya read it over his shoulder, eyes widening. "If this is real—" "It is," Daniel cut in. His grip on Lila tightened. "We finish this." Tonight, Rook barked, sharp and sure, the sound of a soldier's promise given teeth. Snow began again as ash, then remembered itself and fell clean. The gym was a wound of smoke behind them, sirens wailing as firefighters shouldered hoses through the broken doors. Lila's arms locked around Daniel's neck. Rook stood pressed to their knees, chest heaving, eyes bright and fixed, already looking for the next threat, the next job. Maya read the new line on the photograph one more time, letters cooked to the surface by the heat of the near disaster. "Ellis hides him. Find the basement." She didn't say this could be old, or this could be a trap. She said, "We go now." Ramos barked orders into the radio, turning the chaos into a net. "Unit 3 with the fire, Unit 5 with school perimeter. Jenna, keep families at the south gate. Reyes, Hollis, with me." He looked at Lila, at the way her fingers dug into Daniel's coat. "You don't bring a child to a raid," he said softly. "I'm not letting her out of my sight," Daniel answered, equally soft. "But I won't put her in the room." He glanced at the cruiser convoy forming like a thought. 2 minutes behind you." They drove the back streets, the ones that remembered wagon ruts, and the hush of scandal. The church sat on its rise like a lesson, stained glass glowing faintly through the storm. A police line flickered yellow around the custodial entrance, where the earlier fire had licked. A deputy lifted it for Ramos's car. "Keys?" Maya asked, even though the question had teeth. The sexton's ring jingled on a hook by the office, tagged with brittle masking tape. Pastor office, boiler, pantry, vault. The word vault lived in a handwriting that wanted to be beautiful and had learned instead to be legible. Rook pulled toward the hallway without being asked, nose low, tail a stiff metronome. Daniel let him lead. He could feel Lila's breath on his shoulder as she clung to him, wrapped in Maya's spare scarf. "I'll stay by the door," she whispered, and he nodded. Rook glanced back, made a small circle to take in both of them, the child and the soldier, then pressed forward again. The basement door unlocked with a reluctant twist. Cold air breathed up, tinged with something metal, something stale. They descended into cinder block and echoes. Old folding chairs leaned against the wall like penitents. Farther back, a second hallway branched, a place where blueprints had never bothered to go. Rook stopped at a metal door layered in off-white paint. He sat. He looked at Daniel. He lifted a paw. "Here," Daniel said. Ramos tried the handle. Stuck. He wedged a pry bar into the frame. The wood groaned but held. Maya scanned the jamb. Hidden deadbolt. She slid a screwdriver where paint had bubbled, flicked it. The bolt snicked. The door opened an inch, then 2. A smell rolled out. Antiseptic over human. Not rot, not death. Life, barely tended, barely allowed. "Stay with Maya," Daniel told Lila, setting her carefully on the bottom stair. Rook pressed his flank to her shin, pinning her gently to the step. She slid her fingers into his ruff, eyes huge, silent. Daniel eased the door wide. The room was small and wrong, a cot, a lamp, a tray with pill blisters torn and left, a space heater humming like guilt. On the cot, a man sat propped on pillows, beard overgrown, eyes too bright in a face too thin. He looked up when the door opened, and in that first heartbeat Daniel saw it. The same mouth from the photograph, the same stubborn line to the jaw, the same eyes Lila had carried like proof. The man blinked as if light hurt. His voice came rusty but steady. "Is she safe?" he asked. Not "who are you?" Not "what do you want?" Is she safe? Daniel's chest burned. "She is." he said. He stepped aside so the lamplight could find the stairwell. "Lila, stay there." He didn't trust his knees to carry both of them if he let go. The man swung his legs over the cot and nearly fell. Daniel caught him under the arm. Rook made a small sound that meant this is the right man. Maya's breath hitched, just a little, because even professionals bleed a little when a miracle walks in under fluorescent lights. "Sam Whitaker?" Ramos asked, already knowing, pen moving. "Staff Sergeant. Listed MIA 2 years, presumed." "Presumed," Sam said dryly, voice cracking on the joke. He looked past Daniel toward the stairs. "Lila?" Lila stood framed in the doorway, scarf too big, hair tangled, hope carving her from ice. The photograph trembled in her hand. "Daddy," she said, the word so small and so loud it filled the room. Sam's face fell into joy that hurt to watch. "Baby girl." He stumbled toward her. Daniel didn't touch him, didn't need to. The man found his feet on sheer will and reached the girl in 3 uneven steps. Lila flew into him, arms around his neck, the photograph crushed between them. He held her and shook and laughed and cried, and if there were angels in the room, they stood back to give the living their turn. Ramos wiped his eye with the heel of his hand, pretending dust. Maya turned to the wall and pretended her clipboard needed rearranging. "How?" Daniel asked when he found air. Not accusation. "Accounting." "Insurance," Sam said, half smiling, half apologizing, to a world that made such sentences possible. Survivor benefits go farther when the soldier is declared dead. Brent talked Ellis into sainthood for the math. I was leverage when he needed more. I was ballast when he didn't. Sometimes he said God wanted me to heal. Sometimes he said God wanted me quiet. He kissed the top of Lila's hair. I stayed quiet because I believed they'd kill her, if I didn't. I wrote on the back of the photo the week the nurse let her bring it down here after service. Thought maybe someday someone would heat it and see Maya's jaw flexed. "We have enough," she said, each word a nail. "False reporting, fraud, kidnapping, arson, unlawful imprisonment. We have enough." Rook nosed Sam's palm, accepted a slow, astonished scratch. Dogs know the shape of reunions. Dogs are built to live for them. They brought Sam up the stairs slowly, the world too big after a room too small. In the nave, winter light pushed through stained glass and made a patchwork of red and gold on the floor. For a second, the church looked like what it had claimed to be. Then Brent Garrison stepped from a side aisle, hands loose, smile neat. "You ruin everything," he said to Daniel, as if he were chiding a child for breaking a toy. Ramos had his gun up before the sentence ended. "Hands!" Now officers fanned, Jenna at the door, 2 deputies flowing from the choir loft like Mercy with a badge. Brent's eyes slid to Lila, then to Sam, and his mouth pinched, mean. "You were supposed to stay put," he said, the way a landlord talks to a misbehaving radiator. "Funny thing," Sam said, voice growing steel. He drew Lila behind him with a hand that had remembered its purpose. "Daughters!" Pastor Hal Ellis emerged from the sacristy, collar askew, eyes white with shock that had edges of calculation. "This is a misunderstanding," he began, moving toward concern like he might suit up in it. "Stop," Maya said, palm forward. "We have your logs. Your signatures. Your cut." Her voice didn't rise. It tightened. "You wanted a vigil tonight so you could write the eulogy before the fire finished. We'll hold a different service instead." Handcuffs clicked. Paperwork began the way storms end, with sudden clarity. Outside, the town gathered, some drawn by sirens, some by texts they pretended not to read, some by the gravitational pull of news. Faces shifted as officers led Brent and Ellis down the steps. A murmur became a sound, became a verdict. The elderly neighbor across from Daniel's old house, Mrs. Rios, the one who watered her plants at midnight, put a hand to her mouth and whispered, "I should have knocked." I heard her crying, and I told myself I'd be intruding. I told myself it wasn't my place. Tears ran the map of her wrinkles. I'm sorry. It's all our place, Maya said, voice carrying further than she meant it to. That's the point. Arjun arrived at a run, tie crooked, hair snowshot. He took one look at Sam and exhaled a laugh that broke. Well, hell, he said, and then shook the man's hand like a friend found in a crowd. We need statements, we need hospital clearance, and we need the judge on a weekend, but we have something better than all that. We have truth in public. 2 weeks later, the courtroom smelled like lemon cleaner, an aftershave, and a sort of civic shame trying to become civic pride. Brent sat with a public defender and a bruise on his ego. Pastor Ellis sat with a lawyer who couldn't sand the sanctimony off his vowels. The DA moved briskly through counts and exhibits. The town sat behind them, holding its breath, then letting it out in little sighs. Lila sat between Daniel and Rook at the petitioner's table, her boots scuffing the rail, her photograph framed now, the back preserved in plastic so the heat-borne words couldn't fade. Sam sat on the aisle, clean-shaven and bandaged and present. Every time he looked at his daughter, he looked young and old in the same instant. Judge Haynes read the recommendation from CPS slowly, letting each word find its right weight. Immediate termination of Garrison's guardianship. Criminal referrals, no contact. Temporary custody to Daniel Reyes with CPS oversight. Concurrent reunification plan with Samuel Whitaker pending medical and psychological clearance. She looked over her glasses at Daniel. You walked into a storm you did not start, she said. Then you stayed, which is the part that matters. She signed the order. Make a home. Outside, under a washed blue sky, the town didn't walk away. It leaned in. Mrs. Rios hugged Lila and sobbed a prayer into her hair. Nurse Bell handed over a lunchbox with cartoon stickers and said, For the first day, that isn't scary. Principal Green apologized for every door that opened too slowly. A deacon, who had loved the pastor's sermons more than the pastor's temper, set down a crockpot and said, I can't say amen to a lie. People who had looked through Lila now looked at her, which is how looking is supposed to work. They didn't move back to the burned house. Daniel's insurance and Arjun's creative phone calls got them a rental that didn't remember them yet. He hung the photograph over the mantel, front forward for living, back preserved as proof. Rook sprawled on a donated rug like a king who didn't need a throne. Maya arrived that first evening with groceries, Anna with a box labelled cocoa plus lemons for codes. Ramos stopped by with a stuffed fox the K9 unit kept for children and tried not to look ridiculous handing it to a 6-year-old who had already learned too much. Arjun brought a folder, stamped adoption pathways and said, No pressure, just options. Families are nouns, not only blood. Sam moved through the doorway with a limp that would heal and a stare that wouldn't. He had a room down the hall for now, a calendar of appointments, a lifetime of catching up to do. He stood by the mantel and touched the frame with a fingertip. You kept it safe, he told Daniel, and meant more than glass. I promised, Daniel said simply. That night, they ate soup that tasted like a plan, and Lila fell asleep on the couch with her head on Rook's ribs, her hand in his fur, her toes jammed beneath Daniel's thigh as if he were a wall. Sam watched them with the expression of a man watching a country he'd been told was enemy turn out to be home. The next Thursday they went to Parent Day again because the school insisted normalcy is a muscle. The gym smelled like fresh paint and popcorn. Principal Green gave Lila the microphone first, and this time her hands didn't shake. She held up the framed photograph, smile steady. This is my mum, she said. She told me I'm a song. She lifted her other hand toward Daniel and Sam, toward Rook, sitting handsome as a statue in his vest. This is my soldier, and this is my dad, and this is my dog, who is also a soldier. They came when I asked. They stayed. She paused, looking across the rows of faces, some ashamed, some proud, most somewhere between, like people always are. Her voice softened, carrying anyway. I used to whisper, "Please don't send me back." Now I don't whisper that anymore. She turned, found Daniel's eyes, then Sam's, then Rook's. A smile broke like sky after storm. Now I say, "This is home." The room rose to its feet. Not the loud roar of spectacle, but the warm, awkward sound of neighbors deciding to be better. That night, back at the rental, they lit a candle on the mantel, not because they needed heat, but because light belongs in certain stories as a character. Daniel set 3 bowls on the floor, one for Rook, one for a stuffed fox awarded to honorary K9SE, Lila insisted, one for the idea of those who weren't at the table but had made it possible anyway. He taped a school flyer to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a star, "Family Night, Bring Your People." He tucked Lila into bed. She slid the photograph beneath her pillow even though it had a place on the wall now. Habits are bridges. Rook circled once and flopped with a groan beside her bed. "Hey," Daniel said softly from the doorway. "Parent Day next month?" Her eyes were already closing. "You'll come?" she murmured. "Every time," he said. From down the hall, Sam's voice drifted, lighter than it had been in years. "Me too." Lila's mouth curved. "Okay," she breathed. "Then I'm not lost anymore." Daniel stood for a moment in the quiet, letting the sentence settle into the house like a foundation. Snow tapped the window like a polite neighbor. The town slept. Paperwork waited, therapy waited, trials waited, but so did breakfast, and a dog walk, and a school pickup, and the slow, holy work of building a future from burned things. He turned off the hall light, leaving the nightlight to paint its small mercy, and went to sit by the mantel where a photograph held 3 faces and a message on its back that had started a fire and put one out. Rook padded over and dropped his head onto Daniel's knee, a weight that would always say, "Here." "We made it," Daniel said to the dog, to the picture, to the empty air where ghosts had once crowded. "And we stay." Outside, the snow fell clean as a second chance. Inside, a soldier, a girl, a father, and a good dog kept their promise.